Hey friends, Dean here. Before we get you on to your episode, I want to take a moment to invite you to our next virtual online trivia night. Wednesday, May 13th at 8 p.m. Join us either on our Facebook group or on our YouTube page for 3 rounds of fun trivia, music questions, movie questions, general knowledge questions. It'll be a fun time and a chance to win some prizes and have just a good relaxing night of some trivia at home. You don't even have to go out for it. So don't forget, Wednesday, March 13th at 8 p.m. Join us on our Facebook group or YouTube for 3 rounds of fun virtual online trivia. We'll see you there. In this episode, join us as we celebrate one of rock and roll's most enduring bands. From a smash live album to finally getting that elusive #1 single, stay tuned for Cheap Trick.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff, and Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. If you've been listening, you know who I am. If you're listening, you know who the other guy is. If you don't,
so. I hope so.
if you don't, read the title or our little paragraph. I think you know us by now.
Yeah.
This is going to be the episode without us introducing ourselves. How's that sound?
You know what?
You.
First time for everything. Hey, you. Hello. How you been?
I almost said your name. I usually say, right, Eric?
Yeah,
and then you'd
right.
be like, right, and so we already let the cat out of the bag. So
Okay.
the important thing is you're at the 3324 podcast. It could be, I think it would be different if we had 2 different people here, but sometimes we have guests, so there are different people here.
Yes.
The point is that you found us and that you're joining us for this great journey that we take through classic rock, new music, classic films, new films, different subjects. We've got a mixed bag of stuff, but it's all fun. I can guarantee you that much.
Lots of fun, lots of trivia, live
and chock
show.
full of bad impressions as well, from what I've been told. I've been told. I've never said that.
Hey, you know what? I've never said anything. So
I've been told that there were bad impressions. So you won't have to worry about it in this episode, though, because it usually happens in our movie related episodes. For some
That's right.
reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
We don't really bust out impressions of. Well, actually, we have. We did in our Styx episode. We both did an impersonation of James Young.
Yes, we did, didn't we?
So we've done some.
Every now and again, we'll hum a tune, we'll hum the melody or something like that. Yeah,
yes.
we tend to do that, but
Styx was flat out trying to impersonate James Young.
Yeah,
deep,
you're right. Yeah,
I don't know if he's a baritone or what he is, but you won't get that in this episode, though. I can tell you that much. You won't have to worry. This will be an impression free, unless I'm doing an impression of someone else, because Cheap Trick is one of those This is actually, we need to acknowledge, this is actually a listener request episode.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you to John DeGoog. We're going to call him out. He hit us up on social media. He went to 3324 podcast on Facebook. He's a member of the group, and he said, hey, Yahoos, when are you going to do a Cheap Trick episode?
And that's all it takes.
I said, we appreciate your feedback. Don't call us Yahoo, but that's okay. We'll take it. And we said we're going to get it right on the schedule. Then other group members started chiming in like, yeah, Cheap Trick. Yeah, Cheap Trick. Yep. So yeah, let's do it. Let's do a Cheap Trick episode. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think it's great because that's all it takes is for anybody who wants to ask, and
just don't ask us to do an episode about Miko and his Star Wars and Close Encounters work. Almost anything else we'll do, but don't ask about
amongst
Miko.
Other things. Yeah, right. Yeah,
but you can find us on social media. That's how you engage with us.
That's right.
Throw an idea out there, and at 3324 podcast on Facebook and Instagram. It's fantastic. We've just started uploading also the video versions of our episodes. We're putting those on YouTube. So if you're checking us out on Spotify and listening to the episode when it's hot and fresh, we'll eventually get around to posting it on YouTube. So if you need something in the background there as well, it's always nice. I work from home a lot, so I will have some video. I'll just put a video on in YouTube, and then it'll just start like auto playing other stuff. So we're great for the background as well.
Full disclosure, I thought, I was like, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. You know, I don't like watching myself, or so when you started posting the videos, I started watching a few. I'm like, oh, it's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
Dean didn't even. Here it is. I mean, but here's the thing: Dean didn't even tell me he was starting to post the stuff on YouTube. It just started happening. It's actually my son called me. He's like, "What's with all the your episodes on YouTube now?" I'm like, "Oh, really? Let me check that out." So I go there, and sure enough, there's quite a few on there. I'm like, "Oh, okay, well,
maybe much to Eric's initial horror." Oh my God, my face is on every thumbnail. Like, oh my, and I try and find the weirdest photo of us both, like making some like weird grimace, because that's like people are going to pass by and be like, "What is that?"
Yeah, sometimes our technology isn't working so well, so we might
the
get
thumb. We got to find a nice. Well, I try and find a nice still frame photo that embodies the episode. And sometimes it's me making a weird face and Eric is smiling. Sometimes Eric is making a weird face and I'm smiling. I try and mix it up. And, so go check us out on YouTube. Plus, we have some exclusive stuff up there as well.
Right.
Whenever I go to a concert, I try and take some video, and I've thrown a couple of concert clips up there as well. So you'll find some extra stuff there, and we've done some web exclusive stuff, and we plan on doing more. So we got you covered all over the place. We got the video and we got the audio. I mean, what else you want us to do? Go to your house and do the podcast?
Indeed, we do. Yes. Yeah. So
I'm not sure.
Thank everyone for their participation on the page, and as always, we encourage feedback and let us know
not
what
the
we're
kind
doing.
that your guitar gives you when you get too close to the amp,
right? But we would love it if it was mostly positive. We want to know how we're doing, and I
get roasted for the bad impression. So there's all I get feedback. I take
personally, yes, well, right? True that. It's nice to hear from our families and our good friends who have been real supportive with us, doing this. But all you folks out there on the page too. I mean, we're welcoming new members left and right, and we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how we're doing. Are you listening to the podcast? And hit us up. Yeah. Suggestions, comments.
Put a request in. John DeGoog requested this one, and we are more than happy to accommodate. So let's get into it. Let's go into our hat and pull out a cheap trick.
I knew it.
It was corny.
It was corny, but I had a feeling. I had a feeling you were going to go there.
Dad joke. So here we go. We're going to kind of. This is going to be a different episode as well. We're not going to be talking about a specific album, but we're going to kind of go through the career of Cheap Trick, only because they've had there's a couple of things that I've been aware of Cheap Trick, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But there's also they've had a very interesting career trajectory. So first off, let's do some kind of overview stats.
Mm-hmm.
Their first album was released in 1977. I thought it was earlier than that.
They were around going back earlier.
They formed in 73, but first album was 77. So that kind of took me by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
They've sold over 20 million albums worldwide, though. So no slouches. No slouches. Entered the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016, the same year that the very grumpy and crotchety Steve Miller got in. They were on the same the same bill, and funny enough that Rick Nielsen of Cheap Trick is he's had up to over 2,000 guitars in his collection. He's a guitar collector,
mm-hmm.
And he says he doesn't like to give guitars away, but when at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction. Steve Miller was in the audience because he was getting inducted at the same time. And so what Cheap Trick is, they're doing their, thank yous to everybody. And Rick Nielsen goes last, the guitarist.
Yeah.
And he's like, I've got a guitar for Steve Miller. He's here. I want to present it to him. And it's a Miller Beer logo. And it says Miller Guitar on it.
Wow. Yeah.
But in the Miller Beer logo. And it's like this really kind of cool thing. And Steve Miller came up and Rick Nielsen gave it to him, and they hugged and everything. So it was kind of, it was a really neat thing.
Yeah.
And they've released just studio albums. They've released 20 albums or 21 albums. So they're very consistent. That's not counting compilations and lives.
Again, that shocked the hell out of me too, because I, to be frank, I had no idea they were even still together, and they're still putting them out there to this day. I mean,
absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And I think I think one of the overarching themes that's going to come up in this episode is there's two things that I got out of it when I was kind of revisiting them was, consistency and longevity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And those are two things that you see to varying degrees in rock and roll or in music, with what we call like these legacy bands, right? A lot of these bands nowadays, like you'd put in a Cheap Trick or a Foreigner, Journey, Styx. I think we understand, like these bands
Chicago.
are out there touring and they're very successful. They're very popular. Like these guys are not out there at state fairs. They're doing smaller venues, but they're packing them in or they're stacking the bill.
Yeah. Several bands together. Yeah. Whole day.
Brian Wilson in Chicago, REO Speedwagon with Styx and Loverboy. So they're putting together packages of these legacy bands that people are going to see, and then they're bringing their kids, right? And then their kids are coming back, going on YouTube and discovering these things. And Cheap Trick is part and parcel of that. So my memories of Cheap Trick go way back.
Yes.
Very far back.
I remember when I first met you, you were really into them far more than I ever was. But, I remember seeing or hearing, and this was before high school even. I think it was like, I think literally I had just met you and I went up to your house and you were listening to I think you had might have had a vinyl copy of something, or maybe
I had the cassette of Dream Police.
Okay, there. Okay,
but I used to. Eric and I first met. We're gonna give you a little history here. This is nothing to do with Cheap Trick, but I was like a book. I don't know if I was a bookworm. When I was young, I used to read voraciously, but I used to hang out in the library a lot. I just used to read magazines, reference books. Listen to records, just anything that was in the library. I just used to hang out. Yeah. And that's where I first met Eric. When Eric moved into Dobbs Ferry, him and his cousin, for some reason, thought that the library was the hip and happening place. And it must have been because I was hanging out.
Because we were bookworms too. I just distinctly remember going upstairs, seeing Dean sitting, he was like legs up,
12-year-old
feet up on the table, and he's just hanging back. And, I guess we were actually introduced to you by the
librarian.
The librarian.
Yeah. So that was like the scene when I was younger. In the summer, you're at the park. I'm in the pool every day, but in those off months, it was like the library was like the sanctuary of just discovering different things. So anyway, they would have like teenagers. They would have work part-time there. They were called pages for some reason. I don't know if that's an actual term or if I just thought about it recently. I'm like, were they trying to be clever with like the book terminology? Because when you worked there, you were a page. So you would put the books away and someone would check out a book and do this and that and the other thing. There was a guy there. I believe his name was T.H. Culhane. And he was significantly older than me.
Okay.
But I used to be, like I said, be in the library all the time. And he was one of the pages, and he had this black shirt, and it just said, like 3 times repeated, Cheap Trick, 3 times repeated in a typewriter font. And this guy was mad for this band. He was mad for Cheap Trick. It was like I didn't know anything about it outside of the shirt. It
was an iconic. It's an iconic logo. That
they see
it everywhere.
They had their logo from the jump. It looks like it's typed on a typewriter, and they have not. And that's what we talk about consistency. Is they've had that since day one, and it's been their iconic logo font and their iconic logo style, and they've always kept it, and it's become identified with them. So this guy was really into it. So I had heard of them, and he used to talk about stuff, the different members of the band, and let's kind of go through that now. The classic Cheap Trick combo is a 4-piece. So you've got Robin Zander on lead vocals. For a group with a pedigree of the 70s, these guys are like the antithesis of what, except for one member, these guys are like the antithesis of what a rock and roll band is. As good looking and long haired as Robin Zander was, he would wear suits and ties. Like was his fashion style. Right? So he would get like he would go like he looked like a guy that was going to work in an office, but with long hair. Right.
That's right. That's right.
On guitar, you have Rick Nielsen, who we're going to get obscure, and you're going to have to do some research. But he looks like Huntz Hall from the Bowery Boys, and he actually stated that was his that was his inspiration. Is he would wear a ball cap? He would wear a ball cap with the bill flipped up, and he would wear sweaters all the time. and this guy Huntz Hall was an actor, like he was in the Dead End Kids. They were called the Bowery Boys.
Yeah,
a group of young actors from the 30s. They were with Cagney, Angels with Dirty Faces. They were in Dead End with Bogart. And then they had their own film series through the 40s and the 50s. So Huntz Hall was this comedic actor, and Rick Nielsen looked like him, kind of enough that he kind of adopted the style that he was, recognizable. So that's a real reach back into the vaults. I don't think anybody knows who Huntz Hall is now, but you'll have to look him up.
And he would wear his trademark bow ties. Rick Nielsen, bow ties, a lot, and sweaters, and jackets, and just an odd fashion,
odd grouping. Sense. Yeah. And then you've got Tom Peterson on bass, who was like the rock star. He was like the good looking guy that all the women swooned over, because he was a good looking guy back then.
Yeah.
And he was like the sex symbol. And then you have Bun E. Carlos on drums, whose real name is Brad Carlson.
The cigarette always hanging out of the mouth.
Hanging out of his mouth.
The mustache.
The very the very spare and sparse Ringo Starr style Ludwig drum kit.
Yeah.
One rack tom and one floor tom. Very, very basic and very sparse kit. But what the guy didn't need to do, he didn't need anything else, because he was such a good drummer for Cheap Trick, and such a driving drummer. That was all the tools he needed. He's not an Alex Van Halen or Neil Peart, but he's on the level of those guys. Bun E. Carlos is up there.
Oh, he definitely knew his way around the kit. He knew exactly what to do, what not to do. He always reminded me of Charlie Watts, and in the same sort of stance, the stature, just the stoic. And just
with the cigarette hanging out of his mouth.
With the cigarette hanging out of his mouth, but that solid beat all the way through.
Yeah,
was always consistent, and he was one of the.
Wearing a shirt and a tie.
Yeah,
like these guys were like the anti-rock heroes, but their music was decidedly rock and roll.
Yeah.
So it was this kind of this contrast, very interesting contrast, especially in the 70s, where t-shirts and jeans were like the thing again. Like that was kind of. You see the Eagles get up on stage wearing like a Grateful Dead
flannels.
T-shirt, and like
they were very much they
long
wore
stringy hair,
flannel shirts, denim shirts,
just
big
like
buckles.
whatever. And these guys got like dressed, like Robin Zander cut a certain style and a certain outline. So when you saw Cheap Trick, you knew you were seeing them. They visually separated themselves actually from all these other bands by doing that.
I would argue that their fashion sense was very new wave before new wave became a thing, right? I mean,
absolutely.
A lot of people were wearing that kind of thing in the early 80s.
Yeah, you kind of see Duran in the 80s start to wear like the suit,
that's right,
like suits that Robin Zander would wear. That kind of thing.
Absolutely, pushing up the sports jacket, the sleeves of the jacket all the way up to the elbows, and the wide collar shirts, but they were but buttoned all the way up. Right.
Yeah.
So they're kind of
and the tie all the way up,
the ties and the thin ties too. That's another thing. It's like those really pencil thin kind of ties that, so and this was the late 70s. So they might have started that trend, or at least one of the bands that have, I don't know if they can actually make that claim, but it could have been.
I don't know of any other rock band that dressed like that. A popular, we'll say popular rock band. There may have been like some, really indie or underground stuff, but as far as mainstream, Bob Seger, again, t-shirts, jeans, sweaty, like all the bands that they were kind of in league with, Cheap Trick, and people may, get upset if I say this, but Cheap Trick is not like a top tier band. It's just the way it is. They were not in the league of the Beatles and the Stones and Zeppelin. Were they a B level? I'm not sure either. They were closer to like a C level, only because of their, the sparsity of their hits, not because of the quality of their music, but as far as popularity goes, they would kind of bob their head up and then go underneath again.
And not much is said about them. That's the thing. Not much is said about how they did they influence other bands. Did they they're very understated. Very understated in terms of what they actually projected out there. like, the fashion, like we talk about the fashion, we talk about the image factor. Not much is really said about Cheap Trick as a whole. You don't really see a lot of people talking about them. It's interesting that we're doing it now. Maybe we're the first.
Yeah, I mean,
actually point these things out.
Well, no, you've got bands that cite them as an influence, like Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Smashing Pumpkins. Cite them as an influence. So they were, they weren't grunge, but they had the heavy, chunky guitar.
Yeah,
they also had the smart pop sensibilities as well. And they had the main songwriter was Rick Nielsen, the guitarist, and Robin Zander would pop in every so often and co-write, and Tom Peterson would co-write or whatever. But Rick Nielsen was the main lyricist. So
that's very interesting.
You've got that steady hand, you've got that steady, consistent sound. You can hear it. You can hear that.
I would never think that. That's something I at that point in the 90s, I mean, you got these bands talking about Cheap Trick. That's something I had no idea that they were that much of an influence on bands like the Pumpkins. Even it's like, and they're just like way out there. I mean,
if you think about it, you can hear like that. If you listen to a song like Surrender from Cheap Trick, it's got that heavy kind of chugging guitar.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of hear that in the Pumpkins a little bit, not the same guitar sound, but you can absolutely hear that aesthetic in grunge. Yeah. You can absolutely hear like the Rick Nielsen kind of heavy guitar sound that he would achieve. Not every song would be like that, but he certainly had those stuff like that. Like, and oddly enough, starting the Cheap Trick story, Surrender was their, believe it or not, was their first single to chart.
Mm-hmm.
And it only hit number 62. And it was from their album Heaven Tonight.
Yeah.
They became known, much like Peter Frampton, for a live album. That was what put them on the map. Was they were kind of plugging away and putting out albums. And then all of a sudden, but much like Spinal Tap, they were big in Japan, right? They were really big in Japan, but not big in the States. So they go over to Budokan, they do a series of concerts, and they're like, okay, we're going to record, since we're big in Japan, we're going to record these concerts and we'll just put it out in Japan. So that's what they do. They record the concerts and they put it out in Japan, and it just sits.
That makes logical sense, actually. Now that I think about it, when let's getting back to their fashion sense, even it's like they and you see a lot of anime type of
they look like characters.
Bands. They look like characters. There's that influence there. There's all those goofy game shows that Japanese put on, and people are wearing that kind of garb. Yeah, it makes perfect
might have been a little bit of a novelty thing.
Yeah, sure.
So that album is in Japan doing wild business. A few years later, Epic, their label, decides 1979 they decide to release that album all around the world, and it becomes like their smash hit. Their live version of I Want You to Want Me. Yeah. I can remember having that multiple times on one mixtape. Like just always. It only hit number 7. I thought it used to be on the radio all the time.
Yeah, it was. That
song
was
huge. Always on the radio. For some reason, the live album hit, like the song hit. Did you ever hear the studio version of that song?
I have. Yeah,
it is the most vanilla, forgettable
yes, it is
song ever. Right? Am I wrong? I think Cheap Trick fans will agree. When the first time I heard it's much like when you listen to Frampton's studio version of Show Me the Way. It doesn't. It's not the same, and I Want You to Want Me. The studio version is I'm going to say it, get mad if you want, but it's really the wimpiest thing ever.
Yeah.
There's nothing behind it. The song just it's kind of there, but
it just
has it in a live setting, and there's that energy, and it's much more electric guitar heavy because it's less produced because you're performing it live, and it became something else.
Yeah. The version is faster. It's more intense. So you have that call.
It's more punky.
Exactly. And I love the crowd. You always hear them, but very faintly. And then, I think it amplifies in your head, in your mind, how the crowd is going. Like that. But it's very faint when you hear it on the radio. But then when you think that the crowd is doing that, and which they are, it's louder. It appears louder on like as you listen to it. Like you could definitely tell that they're and it's that was around the time that I became not a huge fan of Cheap Trick, but that was like
but aware of
that was a staple of the times of good times and hanging with friends and just very and just sort of like youth, like that was that was a thing, and that's the kind of band, that's the kind of music that that they're good for, that I think they're known for. So if being said, that being said, I don't have to be a huge fan of Cheap Trick to appreciate what they've done for that time in our we've talked about this before about certain bands just being there, and you don't have to love them, you don't have to listen to them all the time, but they were there, they were part of that soundscape of our youth, and Cheap Trick is definitely in that.
This is probably a good time to mention that we've created a Spotify playlist for this. So we've kind of curated what we think is the best or the most interesting parts of Cheap Trick, so you can kind of be like, oh yeah, I remember that song, or I kind of recognize that song, because they've got some hits, and then they've got some minor hits that you're like, oh yeah, I do remember hearing that song. Like they've got those different levels, So that's, we've got that curated on Spotify. We'll share a link. We'll put a link in the show notes as well, so you can check that out and you can kind of take the journey. I think it's a fun. It was fun to kind of put it together. It's fun listening to it as well, because it's kind of the best of with some extras. So
interesting things on the best of the best is the name of the place. Yeah. So
So I think now's a good time to talk about the ELO connection. I teased. Do you know what the ELO connection is? There's actually two. I found another one.
Well, I know that they were Rick Nielsen and I think Robin Zander. They were big Roy Wood fans, from what I understand. They admired him a great deal. And I know they did a cover of Blackberry Way.
Nope.
No?
They did a cover of California Man.
Okay.
They did a cover.
I'm pretty sure that there's a song.
They did Blackberry.
They've done it. I've seen on Spotify, there is a version by, I was like, Cheap Trick did Blackberry Way. I know the song well, because that's a song that that you're very fond of, or at least you commented on in the past. And so it's like all these other people doing that song. So as a Cheap Trick, it was kind of odd to me. I had no idea that there was that.
A very the ELO connection is that the song California Man is by a group called The Move, which Jeff Lynne was a part of before ELO, but very obscure. So it's very curious that this band would pick up on Blackberry Way in one form or another, and in 1978 record a version of California Man, which
it's a deep cut.
As far as Move songs go, was very obscure in and of itself. I didn't hear about it until late into my journey into getting into the Move. Didn't even know of its existence. So very interesting. And then another piece which just kind of fell into my lap earlier today is on one of their albums from the 80s, 84 or somewhere, 83 around there, whatever. They did do a cover of a song called Kiss Me Red, which was from a TV show, I think in 1984, called Dreams. It was like a musical TV show. It didn't last very long, and that was like one of the songs that the kids in the band played or whatever. Yeah. So Epic told them, you know what, you guys got to do a version of this, whatever. So they did it. Kiss Me Red would show up on Electric Light Orchestra Part 2's debut album. Okay. They did a version of the song Kiss Me Red also, which
you dug deep for that.
Dug deep, and it actually has nothing to do with Jeff Lynne because he wasn't in ELO Part 2. But there's the connection.
I thought for sure you were going to comment on the fact that there's a song called ELO Kids.
It's called LO. It's called LO, like hello.
Okay. Well, I thought,
so it's not ELO. I saw that.
Letters. I thought for sure
ELO.
that was ELO.
It could be a wink and a nod to it.
Yes.
Because the song doesn't have anything to do with them.
Okay.
Per se, like Randy Newman actually wrote a song about ELO called "The Story of a Band," which was about ELO. So that might have been kind of what
you need to do. I honestly think you need to do as a side project. You need to create a podcast just about ELO. I honestly think would be why I think that would get tired. Phenomenal.
I like trotting out the information in little bits,
not like doses. Okay,
yeah, not like coughing it all up at once. I like teasing everybody
my mind with the knowledge. I mean, of course, we all have our favorites, and we all have our
yeah.
So we dig deep for what we love, but you tell me stuff about ELO that I had. Jeez,
you know why? Because I'm a goddamn dumpster of useless knowledge. It just gets dumped. People throw their trash trivia in, and I collect it. And I file it away.
I mean, it's cool. Yeah, it's cool to see though when things happen. Like I watch, but the reemergence of Doctor Who, for example. There was an episode based on ELO. This guy was a fan of ELO so much that he was covering their songs and playing the music throughout the whole episode. I thought for sure that Jeff Lynne would have been asked to do some music for the show, but that didn't happen. I was like,
he probably just said, use it.
He should be the next Doctor, Jeff Lynne, floating around in space,
he's halfway there.
Some of those songs reflect that, but anyway,
he's halfway there. So there is a little bit of a connection there. They name check in the song Surrender. They name check Kiss. So they're very self-aware.
Yeah.
Probably wear their influences on their sleeve. Absolutely. One of the things that happened in 1980 is Tom Peterson would leave, the bass player. He would leave, not totally earth shattering because he wasn't like the lyricist or anything, but he was, image wise, it was a change. They got a gentleman named John Brandt who kind of resembled Tom Peterson a little bit.
Yeah.
So they just kind of slid him in. And then they released an album called One on One, which had the song If You Want My Love, which was kind of like one of those minor hits. When I heard it, I'm like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that song like it wasn't a monster hit, but it was one of those ones that was kind of in the background.
Got the airplay. It was enough so that you do remember, because let's point out that I didn't have any of their albums. So the songs that I heard was stuff on the radio, and they were playing a lot of this kind of like these deeper cuts.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember, like if you listen to the right radio stations of the day, they prided themselves on going deeper and not
on
just
playing some of that stuff.
Or if they put out a new album, they would play stuff from that.
Yeah, they would play the hit, and then the next DJ would go a little deeper on it. And,
that's right. Yeah,
that's how you got your musical education back then, and you didn't realize it because you didn't know what you were supposed to be listening to anyway.
You didn't know what you were storing up in your mind, now we're regurgitating all this.
Now we've got it. And in 1980, around that time, Cheap Trick would be sued by Epic. Their label would sue them.
Yeah.
They're kind of being like, you know what, you guys, you need to put out a record and you're kind of stalling. And we think you're stalling to kind of put us over a barrel to like renegotiate your contract. So they had a contentious relationship with Epic, but Epic is like a subsidiary of CBS Records.
Mm-hmm.
But Epic was their main label. 1985 would bring Tonight It's You. That's their closest hit. It hit number 8. So it came close as I Want You to Want Me. Another great song, Tonight It's You. That's kind of, Cheap Trick popping their head up again and hitting the charts.
Yeah.
And that's the story. Then Epic, because they seem to be a really great label, says to Cheap Trick, you know what? You need to start working with outside writers because you guys are just like, what you guys are doing is just not consistent. Like it's,
mm-hmm.
we can't really count on it. We can't really bank on it. So they made them work with other songwriters, and that's got to be tough. It's one thing when you seek out, it's one thing if you're a songwriter and say, well, I want to expose myself to something new and I want to work with, this person I really like,
mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Or it's one thing if you hear a song that you like from a songwriter that might be obscure, like California Man, and you decide you want to do it.
Yeah.
But being told you have to get other songwriters in here because your material just isn't strong enough cannot be something easy to handle or swallow.
Yeah, I don't think so. And and you're not getting that, like you say, if working with other people, if you're getting something out of it creatively, you could admit that might be a songwriter that might be stronger. And
mm-hmm.
it's like, oh yeah, well, that helped us out and that influenced us to do better, but I don't know if this was the case. And I think I know what you're leading up to here with their their first number one hit, and only number one hit.
Yeah, oddly enough, right? So, mm-hmm. so there, Rick Nielsen was like the main songwriter. So he's all of a sudden being told, you know what? it's not cutting it. It's not good enough. Right. And I don't know if it's a reality check, if it's an ego bruising experience, but he had to deal with it. And he said he did have, he did struggle with that. Heart went through the same thing. And when they had their kind of career resurgence with Alone and a couple of those songs, then all of a sudden they were told, hey, that song, All I Want to Do Is Make Love With You, like that was written by somebody else, and they didn't want to do that song. They're like, this is not something that we agree with, but they were kind of put over a barrel. So it's not an uncommon demand, but that's the power that your label, if you're under contract, they're kind of employing you. And they're not in it for chocolate kisses. They're in it to make money, and
I think this is where
that's the Cheap Trick story there.
Yeah, the whole term selling out comes into play where, they have to be, you got to play the game sometimes though. Yeah. Sometimes to really get to do what you want to do at some point, you do have to go through these paces, and that's the record business, or at least it used to be. I don't know what it's like today. I mean, today you can't even get, if you can't just get one song out there, you're done, pretty much, like, much less an album worth of material. Yeah. It's like you have to have a hit right out the gate. And it's very difficult for artists today. I think even more so, but
and so again, if you go into a contract or a career knowing that, like let's say like a Rick Astley or something, or someone that is a singer and is provided material, that's one thing. But in this case, Cheap Trick was kind of said, listen, you guys got to, we're not having this anymore. We're going to bring people in and they're going to write songs here, or you're going to collaborate with people, do whatever. That would be 1986's Lap of Luxury, which I have. That was like the second album I got by them. And it's a great album. I mean, it like Eric said, their only number one hit was The Flame.
The Flame.
Which hit big. Like,
it
again,
really
like
did.
Cheap Trick kind of almost like a shark jumping out of the water. So like they resurfaced again in even a bigger way, and I'm sure that might have been bittersweet.
It really surprised fans of the band that they put a song like that out, which I know Rick Nielsen wasn't a fan of. It's just one of those power ballad type of songs that they're used to doing something a little bit more punky and consistently, bringing that energy, and then being
decidedly
told to do something
uncheap
like
Trick,
that.
Right?
But they cultivated a whole new audience, I think, as a result too. I mean, that song was a monster everywhere.
It was, and the album was really good.
Songs,
it was a strong album. It went 7 times platinum. Yeah. No, I'm sorry, my mistake. It went 1 time platinum. Sorry. So that's $1 million. That's $1 million, but you got a number one single out of it.
Slouch,
No, it hit number 16 on the Billboard, top 200. So it did well for them. Again, back then that was plenty to kind of give them some more breathing room, right? Okay, here's your number one single. You got what you wanted. What do you want from us? They would then kind of go back to writing their own stuff again. Their next album, which was called Busted, it tanked.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you anything past that album. I did, to me, I thought that was the end. They hit it big, and then like I said, I had no idea that they put out how many more. Well into the
they can and that's the thing is their last big album was Lap of Luxury. So then after that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like 11 more studio albums. So that's the magic of Cheap Trick, which is the important thing that I think people should take away from this, is that no matter what, they were undeterred. They went back to making Cheap Trick music. Even though they were told eventually they would part ways with, they got screwed over. They would part ways with Epic. They would sign with Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers would drop them. They would go to an indie label called Ant Records, and they would go bankrupt like a year later. And then they were without a label. So then they made their own label, Cheap Trick Records. So but they took their own fate into their hands. We're Cheap Trick. We make a certain type of music. They never went the disco route, right? They never fell into any of those trends. They just always were Cheap Trick. Now the labels told them to, work with for Lap of Luxury, these other artists, but it was still a decidedly Cheap Trick album, even though The Flame was maybe less so, but like you said, it got them exposed to a lot more people.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just went right back to like making Cheap Trick music, which is what they're best at. You know, they're not meant to be a chameleon. They're not meant to follow the different trends and morph into them. You know, and some bands need to do that to stay relevant. Cheap Trick was like, the hell with that. It's just not what we are.
Right.
We make Cheap Trick music.
Before, they satisfied the record company with that song, the record, the album, whatever. So they did, like I said, they had to pay those dues. They had to do what was told to them. And now, you know, as a result, now they're doing what they totally want to do, you know? So that's a great thing. And like you say, look, stick it out. You stick it out.
And that's the thing. You know, perseverance. They persevered through their fans.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they've got like Cheap Trick fans are diehard loyal Cheap Trick fans. They love them.
Yeah.
You know, and you can't discount that's what's helped sustain them and keep them going and keep, you know, like we said, you know, we talked about the legacy bands. We said Journey, Styx, and some of these other ones. They don't really make music anymore. You know, for the most part, they tour.
They tour
because that's the money, right? Honestly, that's the money. But Cheap Trick is still do. They're like, we're gonna, you know, they don't. Cheap Trick probably doesn't have to make albums anymore, but they still do, right? And I think Dennis DeYoung said it recently in an interview. He's like, he put out what he said was going to be his last album, right? He said, I'm done. This is it. Like, because people don't want to hear it, so why am I going to make new music? Which I can understand that, but it's also sad. When an artist kind of throws up their hands and say, you know, people only want me for what I was. It's kind of sad.
There is some truth to that. I guess
it's better than nothing. Yeah, it's better than nothing. And if you and Billy Joel is kind of like that, right? Billy Joel's like, I have nothing to say. Really, it's not like he doesn't want to, but he's like, I got nothing to say.
Yeah.
So I'm just I'll go perform what people love, and he's okay with that. But Cheap Trick has got the best of both worlds. Is they've got a fan base that's going to buy their stuff and enjoy it. It's not going to burn up the charts, but they're popular enough that they feel compelled to keep being able to put stuff out.
Yeah,
and not just be a touring concern where you're you know, like that's your thing.
Right. I mean, it is sad, and there are. I mean, for every great band, legacy band, there is that sort of cult following, right? There are diehard fans that do want to hear new music, and it's a shame that we don't always get that, you know. So it's so to see somebody, and then of course, you know, there's the age factor too. How much more do they have to say? And
well, he's got the voice. I mean, Robin Zander's voice is in great shape. That's one of the things.
I'm not speaking.
They can still they can still put out a record and it not be like, oh my god, like croaky, or like, oh, this is a pit, you know, this is like a pity thing. Like they're able to put out quality material because his vocal instrument is still in such good shape. So it's not like, you know, it's like, oh man, like, no, like put them out of their misery. No, they're still vital from that aspect.
Yeah.
He's still a very strong vocalist and a strong performer. So why not? What do you have to lose? Especially in these days of distributing it yourself. So you're not really beholden really to record companies anymore. If you could self-distribute and you've got the fan base and you could deliver it right to them, why not then? Right? If they love it. And I know they've been recently re-releasing a lot of old, like, live stuff and a lot of live shows and archive.
Yeah, a lot of people are doing that. Yeah. You know, they're putting out a plethora of, like, just what was once like bootleg recordings are now like, you know, official. Not, you know, they're like official bootlegs, but they're not, you know, they're kind of in between there. So they're like
from the board, so they're going to sound better than somebody with a tape recorder in 1978.
Exactly. A lot of, like, I know a lot of jam bands do it. I mean, like Dave Matthews Band and, you know, those kinds of bands, there's a whole ton of stuff like that. But yeah, that seems to be a thing. I couldn't do that. I don't know. I from listening to one show to another, and some fans are crazy for that though. They'll be able to collect all that. How do you listen to all of that? I don't know.
They embrace that whole aesthetic. Yeah. They would have sections for tapers. You would get a ticket to be in the taper section, and there's pictures, you can find them of people with like microphones on booms to be above the crowd, because the Dead was like, yeah, tape away. We'll even give you a special section. So these guys would bring their decks and follow them around and get some decent quality, because they weren't just, sneaking in a little tape recorder or something, back then that's how you do it. This was before electronics and using your phone. But yeah, I think Bunny Carlos curated a lot of this live stuff. I think in the early 2000s, he had a lot of the recordings. So he just started kind of making them publicly available and kind of feeding out there and giving the fans material without necessarily even having to put out a new album as well. Because if you've got that fan base, they'll eat up a show from, 78, 81, 87, if you've got that amount of content, you can just kind of keep rolling it out there. So
it's interesting to note that Benny Carlos is no longer
I was just getting to that.
Records music with the band or tours, but he's still very much a member.
Yeah. So
I guess he's handling that kind of thing, like archiving and that kind of stuff.
He was doing that before he left. So he had started that already, like kind of being that guy of kind of like, kind of handling the business side of things.
But to do that behind the scenes though, I could see him still doing that for the band.
I don't see why not.
And,
but unfortunately it's not. The reality isn't as sweet as the portrait you're painting. Because much like with many of our other episodes, we have internal strife and drama, which we are now going to cover. In 2010, Bunny Carlos had back surgery. Rick Nielsen's son, Dex took over.
Dex,
until he was okay. He had back surgery earlier than that. He stopped touring in 2010. Bunny Carlos, whatever, I'm done. I can't do it anymore. At that point, he was not considered a member of Cheap Trick anymore. And Bunny Carlos is like, well, I've stopped touring, but I haven't quit the group. Right?
So what's your function?
So it's an interesting position, right? He wasn't thrown out of the group. He's like, I'm not going to tour anymore. I'm not quitting, but I'm not touring anymore.
Right. Okay.
And Cheap Trick is like, you're kind of not really in the group then. Like, what do you get? What do you want from us then? Like, what's going on? So Cheap Trick filed a suit against him. So the three members filed a suit against him saying, this is just so vague. And we don't even know what you're saying, that we have to sue you. And the judge actually dismissed it. They found that Cheap Trick was unfounded. So they had to figure something out. So that's where you said that Bunny Carlos is still a member of Cheap Trick, on paper, right?
Yeah, it was interesting to say the way they put it was like he's part owner of the band. Yeah. So
kind of like Journey, where Steve Perry is part owner of Journey, even though he's not in it.
Yeah.
So then Cheap Trick then had to decide to acknowledge themselves as a trio, kind of like REM. When Bill Berry left, they didn't they needed a drummer for REM, but they didn't bring a drummer into the band and say, hey, he's our new drummer. This guy is, Bill Smith. He's the new REM. REM became a trio, right? So Cheap Trick did the same
session players. Yeah.
Or the son, Rick Nielsen's son.
Or the nepotism comes into play where
big time. So Robin Zander has two kids.
Really?
You know what their names are?
No.
He's got a boy and a girl.
I should know this, but
no, you wouldn't. It might be obvious when I tell you what their names are, but
okay.
One of his kids is Robin Zander, and his other kid is Robin Zander.
A boy and a girl. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
his son is Robin Taylor Zander, and his daughter is Robin Saylor Zander.
That's
interesting. When Tom Peterson needed to in 2021, Tom Peterson was sidelined due to surgery. Of course, Robin Zander's son stepped in and picked up the bass. So this has become like the Zander Nielsen band, because like they got the kids, the kids are taking over. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing. But the good news, right? That lawsuit was like 2012, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
The great thing is there's just somewhat of a happy ending is they get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2016. Bunny Carlos is behind the kit.
Yeah, as he should be. Yeah.
And you should go on YouTube and just watch their set.
Yeah.
Because it's a great set. It's like 4 songs, and they pull, they pull out the stops, and that's like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
They still have it. They, really, and it was great to see him behind there, and Robin Zander's like walking up to him and smile, they're smiling, chatting. So I kind of, that's what I always, we've said that many times, is like with Stick, the issue with Blondie where Debbie Harry wouldn't acknowledge the original members and at the hall. And if Styx ever gets in, will everybody be there? Or Van Halen, when they get in, when they got in, Eddie wasn't there, people weren't there. It's like, here's an opportunity to put things aside for just one night.
Yeah.
Right. You don't got to be best pals. You don't got to go out. Yeah. You don't have to go out to drink later.
Right.
If it's a business decision, let it be a business decision behind the scenes,
Yeah.
And if
we don't have to know that. Sure.
Yeah. And if you look at the comments, if you go to the YouTube video for their set, not their induction speech, but their set, if you look at the comments, almost every comment is about Bunny Carlos, about how great it was to see him behind the kit, how Cheap Trick is not Cheap Trick without him. I'm not going to go see Cheap Trick without him. This will be the last time you see the original Cheap Trick. Like, the fans were just so on his side and so like welcoming back and so excited. They were so psyched that they got to see that, which, a lot of bands, I feel they should do it.
I agree.
Put the crap aside.
I totally agree.
Swallow your pride, then go back to hating each other the next day. You can go back to hating it. The hate won't go anywhere if you really have it.
Because part of what the band is being honored for, I feel, is the stuff that happened back in the day. All their biggest stuff they did as that particular band or those members. Whether you think so or whether some of these members think so or not, I write more songs than you do. There's still that contribution there. There's still, and you can't discount the fans too. You can't discount the fact that fans love, a Ringo Starr, or in this case, Bunny Carlos. He's still, he's popular. They love him. He brings something to the band, and absolutely that should be a thing. It's good for it's all about that. It's all about the legacy of that band, and that's why they're being honored. So yeah. I don't understand the politics of it and why people have to they can't put their bullshit aside sometimes, and just, it's sad. It's really sad, but what are you going to do? Human beings, that's what
human beings, but
a different level of human beings sometimes.
It's great that they did, and when I watched the video, it was great to see that too. Cause he was, he's got such an energy, and very, very underrated. I think when you make top lists of drummers, I don't think he shows up. And even when you make top lists of guitar players, I don't think Rick Nielsen shows up. But these guys really should be recognized as such, because they've stuck it out, and they stuck it out and they didn't sell out. And that's the key, is they remained true to what their sound was, no matter what it is. If you like it, it's going to be there for you. If you don't, okay, we're not going to pander. We're not going to go grunge. We're not going to go disco. We're not going to go 80s pop. Although they came close with, they had the song in Top Gun, which was probably the closest you came to 80s, which was Mighty Wings.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that song?
Yeah, I do.
Like if you may not recognize it when you hear it, you'll realize that it was in the movie, because it almost sounds like score music in the beginning, because it has like that.
Right.
That score sound to it, but then it's an actual song too. So Mighty Wings on the Top Gun soundtrack was probably the closest they came to like the 80s aesthetic of like that glossy music.
Right. And then the great song they had on the Heavy Metal soundtrack too.
Two great songs they had on Heavy Metal soundtrack.
And weird too. Those are the strange.
I think that's the strangest they got.
That flavor to that's the whole concept. So that I dug that about them. That's admirable.
They did a lot of soundtrack work actually. They had songs on a lot of different soundtracks, but for Heavy Metal, they did a song called Reach Out, which we've talked about before during one of my favorite sequences in the film. It's a very strange song for Cheap Trick as well, because it's kind of keyboard heavy and you don't really hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then the other one is I Must Be Dreaming, which is a very strange song.
Yes.
But it's real. I'm not sure if I put it on the playlist. If not, it's going. I think I did it. If not, it's going to be on the playlist.
That's the one I'm referring to. That's the one that I know that I can hear it in my head. But it's cool that they went there. That they did that kind of thing. It's almost proggy. in a sense. Like they're just adding to that. Really, it seems like they just love the idea of doing that film or whatever, and they just kind of jumped right into it and said, "We're going to do something. We're going to add something to this."
Yeah, so and they were chosen with the likes of Don Felder.
Yeah.
So at the time, they were like, you got Don Felder, you had Stevie Nicks there, you had Blue Oyster Cult on the soundtrack, Sammy Hagar, and Cheap Trick's got 2 songs.
Yeah,
in 2 different parts of the movie. So. That's nothing to sneeze at as well. A big cult film, but their 2 songs are top notch.
Dean and I are big fans of this movie. We bring it up a lot.
A lot of people, our friend Andrew Cremines is as well. So there's a lot of people that like it. Yep. If you like weird stuff, check it out. I'm sure it's available. So, I think that's going to do it. I mean, Cheap Trick has had an interesting career, but they're survivors. That's the key. And they've put out good, they weren't as probably as consistent as they would have liked to have been. We have to acknowledge that. But when you check out this playlist, you'll see that they were consistent enough to keep plugging along. And I'm not discounting anything that's not a hit. That's certainly not what I'm saying. But the playlist that we've curated really gives you an indication of when you listen to it, you're going to hear a theme. They've got a certain sound that then you'll be able to identify as, well, that sounds like a Cheap Trick song. Or you may hear the influences in some of these bands like Pearl Jam and these ones that cite them as an influence. You might be like, oh, wow, yeah, I kind of get where that's coming from because of the chunky in-your-face guitar or the manic drumming of Bunny Carlos. I think there's something there for everybody. And they really are kind of unsung heroes of rock and roll. And I'm glad that John asked us to do this episode. I'm really glad he did. Because I'm not sure we would have gotten around to it, but I think it's one that we absolutely should be doing.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing, like, we don't have to, and again, we really don't have to love every band that we talk about or every album, but it's really great to look, to do the research, to go and to listen to this material, stuff that we've probably never listened to before. It's fun. It's just fun to it
was fun for me to revisit it, to go through.
Right.
And be like, oh my God, I remember that song. And I had the Dream Police cassette and I remember that song from it. So it's nice to kind of take a stroll off of the stuff that we know that we're going to talk about. And have a listener throw us one and say, yeah, well, what's your take on this? And what do you think? And I was acquainted enough with Cheap Trick that this was not a problem. And again, they've got such great stuff.
Yeah,
that they fit in well. So we're going to advocate heavily for checking out. Go check out their other stuff, or just check out the playlist, and I think you'll get a really nice. Right. It's a nice list. I think we got like 14 songs on there, so it's a good amount. And if you were around back then, you'll probably know. I'll say you'll know 95% of them.
Well, that's the point I was going to make is it evokes a time in our lives that we can all agree was a really great time for as a kid, being a kid.
Fertile ground for these musicians.
And bands like this, like, have that for me. That's the value of these bands for me is, so like I said, they're great. There's some great songs, but like I said, I didn't have any of their albums, but I really dig the time of my life and in that sense. And it's just the soundscape, you pull from that. And when somebody else wants to, give us that and tread down that path with us, that's even better. And that's what we're looking for, So
how about this? You dress up like Rick Nielsen for Halloween, and I'll dress up like Bunny Carlos.
There you go.
I think I've got the body type now.
Yeah.
What do you think? Maybe
that might be a cool thing. Sure. You put the Vans on, like the shoes, the stripes.
He was big into the checkered stuff.
There you go. Yeah.
Guitars with like 5 necks on each side. I mean, the guy was just, he became a character, but he also became known for his love of guitars and his unique guitars as well. So there's a lot there. There's the image, but then there's the music. But then there's just the longevity of really the great Cheap Trick. These guys stuck it out, and their fans are with them for the long haul. So again, we're going to thank John DeGoog for recommending that we take a look at Cheap Trick. This has been an honor and a pleasure to do it. It's been a lot of fun. So join us on social media, 3324 Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. If you've got a request, even if it's something we've done, we'll always do ELO. They've got a lot of, we've only done one album out of 15, so we got plenty to go. But by all means, let us know. Thank you for joining us. For Eric, this has been Dean. We will see you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.